presented by Rooftop Innovations. We are now joined by national college football columnist Max Olson with theathletic.com, and Max, a part of that story about all hell breaking loose on Friday, August the 4th. Max, thanks for your time. That was juicy. Some of that had kind of been known, but my goodness, how intriguing was going through all of that information and getting that background?
Yeah, I mean, it's, we probably could write 10,000 words on what happened in the past week and all the stuff in the Pac-12 that led up to it. So just trying to push the story forward, and there's a lot to compile there, a lot of different sides to this story. So yeah, I appreciate you mentioning it. I thought our crew did a good job of putting that together, and it is wild too. Well, and there'll be a lot more. We got more of these stories in the works, obviously. There's just a lot of different ways to break down what went down. Honestly, guys, that you still think about it here, a few days later, and we're still kind of dealing with the fallout of this. Mm-hmm. That really was, wasn't that one of the more kind of dramatic and consequential days you can think of in terms of college athletics here recently?
We just had Chuck Cooperstein on, who's been broadcasting college football forever. He called it the single most historic day in college football history because of the history, the traditions, and everything else, even more so than Oklahoma and the NCAA and the Supreme Court and or the death penalty. That's where he puts it. Oh, wow. Friday and the story in college football historical perspective.
Chuck's been, he's been in the game longer than I have, so I respect his take on that. I think, in the way this is heading, there's obviously a lot that needs to get sorted out still, but, I think probably it seems like with these 4 Pac-12 schools left, it's kind of more about finding them a home than it is about kind of rebuilding and restarting the Pac-12 conference. So, yeah, historically, if this is one of those moments where it truly is like the end of a conference, like it's pretty remarkable. But obviously, you guys, I give you all a lot of credit. You have really we've all been kind of covering this Pac-12 thing pretty seriously here for the past 12 months. So in some ways, with the buildup of this, if you've been paying attention, it's kind of not that shocking in terms of just the outcome, and that it didn't go great for the Pac-12, but it's still, it's still kind of hard to wrap your head around at the same time.
Max, the way I think about it a lot, and, outside of, the Big 12, diverting on a path and saving itself, if you started these things out, and if the Pac-12 had done this, you remember the old overhead projectors where they'd, overlay something, and you'd see, the differences and the similarities? If you had overlaid the first part of this for the Pac-12, it would look very similar to everything that was going on in the Big 12 over the years, and the Pac-12 somehow didn't learn from that. I think that's what surprises me the most, is that they didn't look across and see where this has happened before and think it applied to them at all.
Yeah, I think that's well said, and it's literally the same starting point when you talk about the big change. It's literally the same starting point of your kind of your 2 biggest brands, and them deciding to move on, and the power that they've had over the years, and then them deciding to just kind of pack up and move on to a different league. And certainly, just like with the Big 12, Pac-12 did not see that coming at all in terms of, being able to talk UCLA and USC into staying. And then from there, yeah, it was remarkable. You guys remember, soon after that, I think probably a week or 2 later, we were all at Big 12 Media Days and, meeting Brett Yormark for the first time. And I spent one of the days there at Media Days talking with athletic directors pretty much the whole day. And you could just tell, it was still all very fresh in their mind. They understood we have to strike and go after these Pac-12 schools because they've lived through it. They've lived through the uncertainty of how much money are we going to make in the future? Is this thing going to stick together? Can we trust each other? They've gone through that whole exercise before in real time. And so, they understood how to act in this stuff. And certainly it felt like the Pac-12 folks overestimated their value and kind of underestimated the danger, at every step of the way.
So we talked to Mac Rhodes the other day, and when talking about any further Big 12 expansion, he let it be known like, hey, obviously you never say never, but there's just not TV dollars out there. And then we had Jamie Pollard on from Iowa State yesterday, and he said, as far as he's concerned and they're concerned, there's no more TV money for any further expansion. Now, obviously, Max, that could change because something else seismic could happen. And you look over on the East Coast right now, and you mentioned those remaining Pac schools, and there's obviously a lot of heat and a lot of smoke about whatever's going on with the ACC. How do you view that? How do you kind of unpack the order of things right now? Is it all about just what happens with the Pac-4 and then we move along, or how much are your eyes on this saber rattling by Florida State and others?
I know it's like kind of hard to have enough bandwidth to really deeply follow the ACC stuff, and then we had the thing last night of ACC expansion, and then that kind of running into some roadblocks too. So, certainly that August 15th kind of deadline is kind of looms large here. I mean, at this point, I would be surprised if Florida State was really trying to pull out of the ACC at that deadline. I feel like this is more going to be a story that kind of plays out over the next year. But I mean, who knows? Certainly there was. There's a period of time in the spring when they're having their conference meetings, and certainly there were members of that league that were aligned and trying to look into breaking the grant of rights. And so it doesn't. Yeah, I mean it's like never say never on a bunch of fronts here at this point. But if he's not moving forward with expansion, then I think that's probably the thing that you're keeping an eye on. And look, I think the Big 12, in all my talks with people in the conference over the course of the summer. Certainly no one ever really felt like the Four Corners schools coming was a sure thing by any means.
Sure.
And I think they certainly felt like, look, it wouldn't be the worst if that stuff doesn't come together. It wouldn't be the worst thing to sit back and see what happens in the ACC. And there's certainly, members of that conference that could be a good fit and absolutely would boost the basketball value that we always talk about too. So yeah, I think the Big 12 would be more likely to like kind of sit back and see if that turns into a mess. And can they capitalize on it than try to pick up some of these West Coast schools? I think at this point, I really don't see them taking San Diego State, and it doesn't seem like there's really that interest in the rest of the Pac-12 schools.
But I wouldn't mind covering a game there. It's a beautiful city, and we've been there before. I know what you mean by that. Max, has there ever been a topic, and in the time you've covered college football, that has ever lingered and continued onward the way this one has with realignment?
Yeah, isn't it such a lightning rod? I know we certainly we definitely get readers who are like, hey, I don't like this stuff that's going on. Like, I kind of hate it. Like, you guys we get it. You got to cover it a lot, but I kind of hate these things that are playing out. But I mean, certainly nothing really captures people's attention quite like this stuff and like all the moves and machinations and stuff. And I'm sure that's probably been the case for your guys' ratings too. Like, this is just one of those topics that, and especially in this round, when it involves so many leagues right now, because, it's not just the power ones, it's the American and the Mountain West trying to figure out what their next move is too. I think this is one of those things that I suppose we should probably always expect it when these TV deals come up and stuff like that. And gosh, I mean, you wish you could say like, okay, this stuff will get sorted out and maybe this will settle down until like 2030, but I think we all probably know that's probably not the case, right?
Doesn't seem to be. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of irons in the fire. You thought the Pac-12 would come to a resolution. We're still waiting on that, right? I mean, that's got to finish up. So, yeah, absolutely, Paul.
And then the Big Ten, we for months it was like, well, I mean, if they wanted Oregon and Washington, they would do it. And then, literally, for 24 hours, they change their mind and do it, right? So it's just like you're kind of on the edge of your seat all the time with this stuff when it's active.
Max, and going back to the ACC and Florida State real quick, and as somebody who obviously has observed that particular situation very closely. Where I get confused on them is they've either, based on, because they've looked at everybody else being able to move conferences in an hour and go, okay, well, we can do that, have figured out some kind of silver bullet legal strategy, or this is noise until they do.
I think even people within the conference are trying to figure that out. Like, what is gained by all this very public dissent about the revenue gap and these things that are obvious to everybody, but that Florida State is really hammering, not just their AD but their board. I think that as you size it up, like I think it's still a matter of can they get 7 or 8 or whatever the necessary number is, member schools to want to move forward with trying to break this. I don't think it's a solo project. That's not really how I look at it. I guess I could be proven wrong. Maybe they feel like there's an angle to this they've got to do. But, I mean, it certainly seems like Greg Sankey is choosing his words carefully and doesn't really want the perception that the SEC is pursuing this. Obviously, ESPN is partnered with both of those leagues. And I mean, let's be real. These moves that have been playing out over the past few years, they're, I'm not going to say they're all dictated by the networks, but when it comes to paying for stuff, they're the ones that have to sign off on these things. So, it is a little confounding. It's like, you certainly understand Florida State is one of those schools that views themselves as, we are building something special here. We want to compete for national championships. We feel like if we're making this amount of money through 36, we will not be able to compete for national championships. And certainly there's schools like Clemson that feel like they're in that boat, in that league, that they have that ambition and they get nervous about the money. But yeah, how do you actually like pull this off? I think is sort of I think everybody is kind of suspicious of like kind of what's going on there.
Max, we discussed this earlier today. I didn't know this. We found this out and corrected it. But Notre Dame has a vote, even when it comes to football membership. Although they're not a member of the ACC in football, they play that schedule. Why would they have given him that vote?
Well, and then you saw the comment this morning from Jack Swarbrick, who's one of the more respected ADs in the country, who's essentially like, I mean, I don't know. I guess people, reasonable people can read it differently, but is he sort of saying he thinks that like Stanford and Cal is just like kind of a pity vote they need to do?
Yeah, that's how I took it. Yeah, for the good of college academics / sports.
Academics and mankind, we need to add these. I mean, look, I understand they're ranked extremely highly, and certainly we know that is a metric that the presidents care about. There's a lot of other metrics that presidents and ADs need to care about and do care about. But that part of like Notre Dame having that much power in a league that they're not really fully committed to joining, in terms from a football standpoint, that is curious. And you wonder, like, with one foot in the door, like how much power do they have in that room? I know they're about to have an AD change as well. I was a little surprised by that revelation as well.
What did you think about SMU and their pursuit, going so far as to, reportedly not even want any TV money for several years, just for an ACC invite, knowing that, hey, this is maybe the last little, opening of light for a program like ours to make a leap. They obviously are going all in, Max, but what do you think about the ponies and any possibilities there with the ACC, and how do you think that would work out for them?
The note, like this idea that SMU would forego revenue for 5+ years. Honestly, I've heard that for years. I've heard that has been the offer they have made to. I'm sure probably to Bob Bowlesby. I'm sure probably to Brett Yormark and like anyone who would listen. That this is like this is how bold they're willing to be to kind of try to buy their way into the club here and certainly. I think they just view it as like whatever it takes. It's just really important for us that we take that step and become a program that is viewed differently. So I wouldn't surprise me if they tried to do that. Can you put together the money to be competitive in those leagues without taking distributions? I think is a very interesting question that takes massive commitments from people over a long period of time to bridge the gap there. But and then certainly there's still an adjustment. If you throw SMU into the ACC, like there's still a little bit of an adjustment to that program to become like really competitive in that conference. But I love the ambition. I certainly I love the screw it, we'll do whatever it takes. Name your price. I don't know. I'm sure that they would have loved to move into the Pac-12, and I bet they probably were well positioned to move into the Pac-12 if Pac-12 had stuck together, and who knows if they get the votes on that. But certainly if you feel like if you're at SMU, this is one of your last chances to try to pull off one of these moves.
Max, if you had stupid money like that, would you just give it to your school so they could play in a better league?
No, I wouldn't. I would probably, and then once you get to the league, it's like when you give a mouse a cookie, right? Like, it's like, once you get into that league, then they're going to be like, well, we got to buy better players.
Right.
Too,
Yeah.
so we're going to need money for that. You know what I mean? We're going to need better facilities too, to keep up with these guys. So it's just like, that's a lot of money. A lot of money that, I certainly don't envision myself earning over the course of my career.
Yeah, that's the type of money where you have so much money that doesn't matter, Paul. It's like going to the gas station and buying a Snickers bar or something.
But that's why I called it stupid money, because it allows you to do a stupid thing.
Yeah, and not even feel it in some way. But to Max's point, like then you're constantly open ATM basically to maintain that. So yeah, it's very interesting dynamic, and it's just crazy like how many little levers can be pulled that affect the entire stretch. Like we are still waiting on the PAC, and then here's the ACC, and then there's still the Big 12 looming, and we know the other two are looming. It's crazy times for sure. I did want to ask you a non-realignment related question, though, Max. You covered Texas for several years. Big day for them today. A couple of Duncanville players pledged. Caden Durham to LSU. Great get for the Tigers. But Colin Simmons, the big 5-star number 1 player in Texas, pledges to the Longhorns, his teammate. Your thoughts on just kind of what's cooking? I was speaking earlier. It's easy to poke fun at Texas, for various things. But just, reading the tea leaves and kind of seeing the way everything's setting up with the SEC and with Sark and just the stability and Arch and Colin Simmons, and it just feels a little bit different. Am I getting over my skis here, or do you sense that as well?
No, I think you're right, and I think we've seen, let's call it what it is. Texas is getting some dudes. They are winning some really big battles here in the past few cycles, really since this staff under Steve Sarkisian took over. You could say, well, Texas has always recruited at a high level, but I think Colin Simmons is the kind of player that probably ends up at an LSU or Texas A&M or Miami or whatever under some of the previous regimes. Like, those are just really hard battles to win. I don't know if Texas is just there's an advantage now in the NIL era that maybe they have a chance from that standpoint, just from a capital standpoint, to be able to really contend for the best of the best. But I mean, they're building some really, great classes. And I think I'm not trolling when I say this at all. If you just go by 24/7 or on 3 or whatever rankings you want to use, if you just go by those rankings, Texas is going to have a CFP caliber roster next year when we go to a 12-team playoff. That's just the bottom line. They're going to have that is going to be the expectations here going forward as they keep signing these classes, is that, yeah, you're going into the SEC. There's going to be an adjustment. It's going to be really difficult. But, man, you've got the players, you've got to capitalize. And so I do think they're going to be one of the more talented teams in the country next year if they can kind of keep this together and keep kind of building in the right direction. And the expectations, I think, are about to take a really big jump, just in time for them to go to the SEC.
Max, appreciate you always. Great stuff with the article on theathletic.com on the backstory and what was going on. It was crazy over a 48 to 96 hour period of time. Max Olson, theathletic.com, with us on 365 Sports most every Thursday at about 4 o'clock.